Hello. So James and I are going to do another podcast. This one is going to be based around retrieval, or the practice of trying to remember information and trying to bring it to mind. So really, we've both been reading the Powerful Teaching book, which a copy of is in the Teaching and Learning Library, should you want to borrow yourselves. And I was really taken by the ideas of free recall versus like a clued recall. So I do lots of clued recall, I do lots of quizzes at the start of every lesson. That's what I do at the start of every single lesson. But the other things with the clued recall are things like crosswords or fill in the gaps. And that provides obviously just a bit more scaffolding for the students. And the book also recommends some ideas about kind of free recall. So I don't know whether you use much free recall.
Yeah, so that's something that I think me and Sadie have both stolen recently in terms of the idea of like a brain dump. So simple whiteboard activity, individual activity, lots of different sort of ways of going sort of about this, or even naming their sort of strategy, but literally putting a topic on the board. So I might go with something like muscle fibre types, and then give the group 4 minutes, 5 minutes to work independently to get as much information as they can without me giving them any sort of prompts as to, you know, the characteristics or the sporting examples, and just giving them, you know, as much time as they need to get as much detail out. Occasionally I might finish with like the last 45 seconds where I bounce some ideas off a partner, top up your ideas, but ideally that should be an individual sort of task. I'm quite keen on that being in silence as well, for students to really think, you know, and try and recall as much information as possible.
And I think it just suggests in the book that it improves learning, that learning is strengthened. So again, I, as a result of the book and kind of discussions with James, I've started doing that, say, mid-lesson. So I might say to them, right, on your whiteboards, I want you to just brain dump everything you can remember about this topic, the topic we did the last 2 lessons. And you have got 6 minutes, do it now for me. And they'll do it in silence and they'll write it all down. And what the book notes as well is the learners themselves identify gaps. And it helps with their metacognition because they become aware of their own learning. So they become aware that there's gaps, where the gaps are, and also just from a teaching and workload perspective, there's no additional resources. So you're just saying, write down everything you can remember about this. And they also start to, it becomes more robust, and they make connections or they group information together on their whiteboard. So it's really helpful. I think the other thing I started doing was like a mid-lesson quiz as well. So partly, to be quite frank, I was teaching lesson, I was teaching a lot of theory, and I got to a point in the lesson where I just like, I'm genuinely bored of the sound of my own voice now. And the whiteboards are always out anyway, so I was like, right, turn and talk, we're going to do 10 questions on your whiteboards, please. And then this lesson, we did stuff on this lesson before, etc. And one of my learners just went, I really liked that. So again, that's a bit, well, somewhere I suppose in between the free recall and the clued recall, where you're asking them to recall some information, but it just helps spend more of your lesson time retrieving, making the learners think back, what's that information, who said that, and that's quite a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think the key thing is to sort of take away at all times with the idea of retrieval and the way that we sort of learn is to be getting information out. And in the book they make, you know, this really clear that we should spend more time getting information out of our students, whether that's on whiteboards, whether that's them, you know, verbalising, answering exam questions, quizzes, whatever it might be, rather than just, you know, stuffing information into them.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to get content into them, but we can, you know, quite quickly, and using some of these strategies like brain dumps, like mini sort of questions and answers and quizzes, those types of things, very quick and easy ways to get information out of the students to, you know, to gauge exactly where they are. But what's interesting as well from the book and from other sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Journals, research papers, There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Is that quite often you don't need to actually go back and review and to always give correct answers or to see where students have made mistakes, because the students start to become aware of that themselves. In some cases, there's research to suggest that actually providing feedback can improve longer term learning, and they obviously get that with quizzes, etc. But with things like a brain dump or retrieval grid, it's not always the demand for you to go back through and to spend another 10-15 minutes reviewing that. Sometimes just flashing the answers up, or just going, right, you've got 4 minutes, tell me everything you need to know, and then at the end going, fantastic, I don't know, 10 bits of information, rub it off, and we go again. So there is research to suggest that using feedback can help, but actually, again, it's not always necessary.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, because I think with the brain dump activity or the mid-lesson 6 quizzes, or another thing, I know that maths do this a lot, I mention this quite a lot, but the other thing that's mentioned as well is things like a 5 a day. So on the board as they come in, or you shout to them, we don't want to add to staff workload, but you shout to them 5 questions as their 5 a day. And again, they write them on whiteboards, that it's not adding to your workload, but they're spending more time trying to pull the information out. And it's the same thing with questioning. So, if I'm telling you need to know what a survey is, okay, I'll tell you what a survey is because I've got the information, and I'll tell you the 2 types, but that doesn't mean I don't then keep questioning them. So I just said it, but remind me, what's the survey? Right, on your whiteboards, I said for the exam, you must have 2 types of the survey. Everybody on your whiteboards tell me the 2 type. So, we're only asking for 2-3 minutes at different points in a lesson to have that information retrieved, not to rewrite our lessons and not be putting all the information in that we need to put in, but just trying to make sure that we spend quite a lot of our time, 2 minutes, in our lessons, pulling the information, getting them to retrieve it. And that means that they're going to learn much better, their learning strengthened, and as I said, it models as well retrieval for their exams and revision. When they revise for exams and bits of coursework and assessments, they need to retrieve the information, and then if we can model that in some way with those things in our classrooms, then we're modelling best practice for them in their learning as well.
I guess you summarised the key reason why we're doing this in terms of looking at retrieval is the fact that all of our exams now have gone linear in A level, and actually lots of BTEC and CTEC courses have got exam units in there as well. So it's really important that the students are actually learning over a longer period of time and have the ability to retrieve, rather than them trying to cram everything in the last week before their exam, because that's not shown to be effective. Just looking at the idea of the different use of questions and different types of questions, because we've also made reference to quizzes before, where ultimately lots of those questions are going to be sort of multiple choice questions, which again links to them being sort of cued or clues sort of retrieval opposed to sort of free recall. There's evidence to show that exam questions, multiple choice questions, free recall questions are all beneficial to learners. And me and Sadie were discussing the idea of actually using a sort of a combination of those style of questions on a quizzes. So for some of them, they can be multiple choice. For others, it can be the type of question where the students have to respond with the correct answer, and they need to identify which muscle fibre type, or they need to identify the neurotransmitter for muscle contractions, and they need to then bring that back from their brain. They haven't got any clues or hints in the multiple choices where they go, well, it's definitely not A, it's not B, it's not C, therefore it must be D. So that therefore has maybe a better or greater impact on their learning in the long term. But at the same time, and again based on my sort of master's research with this, is that multiple choice questions can be really effective when maybe we've just looked at content for the first time, when success rates might not be the highest because we haven't had a lot of retrieval opportunity, and they can really build a lot of confidence and then build the success, and then we can slowly start to move towards the more free recall strategies like the brain dumps, like the fill in the gap, or you have to come up with the answer rather than just selecting the correct choice. So you can almost differentiate the retrieval in there as well. So a brain dump might be a really good way for students to retrieve. But again, if they haven't had a great deal of opportunity, then something like a multiple choice question might build a bit of success initially.
Yeah, definitely. It just helps in terms of offering good variety, and like you say, those free recall types of questions or retrieval is much harder. And so having had that scaffolding, so they start the lesson with the quizzes, might do a mid-lesson quiz, and then towards the end they're doing then a brain dump. There's that scaffolding built in, and I suppose it's important to note that retrieval should be very low stakes. So it should be quizzing, it should be crosswords, it should be brain dumps, it should be wipe off your whiteboard. It's not really exam question, although obviously retrieving information is part of it. Generally retrieval should be very low stakes, very gentle, just trying to pull the information. I'm sure we're all conscious that particularly the first years lack confidence and have some anxiety, and therefore that quizzing is often built into fun, or it's again just gentle recall rather than anything considered to be too stressful that we haven't built into yet.
Yeah, it doesn't need to have a grade at the end and say, no, you haven't done this very well and that's a D grade type of response, or you've only come up with 10 bits of information on the brain dump, therefore you need to go away, work on it. The idea is that it should be very low stakes. It should ultimately, and again there's research in the book Powerful Teaching, and lots of research to suggest that actually using these low stakes retrieval ideas can actually help reduce exam anxieties in the long term as well. So we need to make sure, in some cases it might be competitive and it might be fun, like a quizzes where they get their score, and sometimes we might say, right, count the bits of information you've got, hands up if you've got more than 10, perfect, but we don't need to highlight to students that they haven't done a good job, or that's an E grade, or you would have failed the exam if that were the case, that type of thing. So keep it low stakes, keep it fairly fun, engaging, and as quick and as frequent as often as possible.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd probably noticed lastly for me was that they also picked up on that the 24 hours before a test really increased the performance as well. So the way we structure the second years is they get a weekly mock, so they're told what to revise for a week, and then on the Friday is mock day, so they then get a mock on that, and that's exam. I mean, that's not really linking too much into the kind of quiz and retrieval, but they get an exam question on it to time, so they're starting to build up those skills and build up their confidence. But before, as a kind of result of reading that, we'll do the quizzes just on that grid they've been asked to revise. I'll get them to do a crossword, which I know is again the clued recall just on that topic, and then they'll do the free recall on the whiteboards, they'll brain dump it and then wipe it all off. And that evidence suggests that because I'm doing it within time for that exam, they're recalling it and it supports them before. I find it also really, really helps with their anxiety. Again, it noticed that it does tend to increase their performance as well, and therefore just helps balance it all really.
I think a good way to maybe sort of finish today might be to just summarise some of those key strategies that we've sort of gone through, because like we said, in some cases it's not heavy in terms of planning and it's real low maintenance and it's real quick wins and it's highly effective. So I know we both use quizzes in most of our lessons, if not, I know you use it every lesson. Going back to questioning, but questioning can be a very quick way to get some answers back from students, including the cold calling stuff and the bits that we've already looked at in the previous podcast. I know we've both developed the idea of the brain dumps.
Yeah.
And again, those could be, you've got 5 minutes at the end of the lesson, and rather than letting the students go early, you just put in a topic on the board and saying, right, you've got 4 minutes, 5 minutes, off you go. It could be mid-lesson, could be at the beginning of the lesson, tell me everything you learned about this topic from last week or last month or last year. I've put a few ideas in terms of the retrieval grids. I know the guys in your faculty now are starting to use them more and more, which is really good. And there's some copies on the staff resource Google Classroom with some blank copies as well. But maybe have a look at some of those ideas on there, because that's a really good way to retrieve from today's lesson, last month's lesson, last year's lessons in some cases. And then the only other sort of idea I've noted is where we said about questions and creating questions is getting the students to create their own questions. Here's the topic, create your own sort of exam-based question or multiple choice question. I want one from this topic from today, I want one from this topic we did last month, and then you're going to roam the room, mask up obviously, and you're going to ask 3 people, and then you're going to answer their questions as well. And again, real low maintenance because the students are doing their doing our hard work for us.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only one, I completely agree with all of those, the only one I'd add to that is that I do find that mid-lesson quiz is a good way to just, mid-lesson quiz or mid-lesson brain dump is a really good way to just bring it back, and just the focus should always be trying to spend as much of your lesson, most of your lesson at different points, trying to get them to retrieve the information, because it's considered to be like a power tool in terms of helping their revision, their cognitive load, and making sure that it sticks and real good strong learning takes place.
I guess, and I know I've seen this around college as well, but some teachers using the idea of like an exit ticket.
Yes.
Which again is just, tell me something you've learned from today, bang, and then sort of taking that, and that's your pass to leave the lesson.
Yeah.
But like we said, the key idea is getting as much information out of the students rather than just cramming and filling them with information. Get as much of it out as you can. But definitely have a read of the book. It's got some really good implications in there for you to take away, and it's got lots of research as well to sort of back it up.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.